Hello, everybody. This is Shane R. Monroe, and you are in the passenger seat with me. It's Passenger Seat Radio. I am here with my returning guest, game developer Warren Davis, famous for such games as Q Bert, Joust 2, the Laserdisc game Us vs. Them, Terminator 2, Revolution X, and so many more. This is part 2 of our interview, so if you missed out on part 1, you definitely want to go check that out. Warren is here to talk about his new book, Creating Q Bert and Other Classic Video Arcade Games, available now at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and everywhere books are sold. Welcome back, Warren.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you for having me. I'm ready for part 2.
Boy, part 1 was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
It was. It kind of flew by. We covered a lot of ground, but it didn't seem like an hour and a half.
It didn't. I don't know if you've gotten any feedback from folks in your world, but everyone loves it. Everyone loved the interview, and they're dying for part 2. So they were hoping we didn't flake out and not deliver before Christmas. So.
Oh wow, yeah. Well, that's great. No, I'm glad to hear that. That's wonderful.
Well, tell us how's the book doing?
Funny you should ask. Let me demonstrate with some material here.
Oh, we actually get to see one. Holy crap, and there it is.
The books are printed.
Look at that.
I got a couple of copies here. I don't think I've opened this yet. It looks beautiful.
So awesome.
Yeah, the color.
You are here with a passenger seat radio exclusive. Look at this.
Yeah, this is it.
Looks beautiful.
It is actually physically available, and I'm actually able to hold one in my hands. I'm very excited.
When did you get them?
I can't wait to read it, by the way, to find out how it ends.
When did you actually get them?
They were delivered last night.
Wow, really? I mean, so you're still kind of riding the high of holding that thing, right? This is your first printed, published book this, right?
Actually, no, because I self-published. There was the self-published version of the book.
Right. And there was a hard copy of that?
No, that was never hard copy. This is hardback. So that's different. But yeah, no, but the thing is, I went through the process myself of laying out the first version of the book. Everything was me. I wrote it, I laid it out, I sent it to a printer online, paid for every copy, got them back, and then I sold a few copies online and also at one show that I managed to go to before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And as we talked about last time, it was during the pandemic that I decided to reach out to actual publishers, and that started this process, which I think I signed a contract with the publisher like January 1st of this year. So It's been an all year long process, and the publisher wanted to do some edits. They wanted a new title. They wanted a new cover. My original book didn't have a foreword or an afterword. Ed Boon was kind enough to write the foreword, and John Newcomer wrote the afterword. So it's a real book. It's a real book. My publisher just sent me a link that it has been reviewed on Publishers Weekly.
Wow.
So
was it a good review? I mean, do they rate it or something? It was good? Yeah.
It was, yes, surprisingly. It was.
I'm not surprised. It's an awesome book.
It was a positive review. So I couldn't be happier. And I have them now. So,
that is so
the
exciting.
other thing that is going to take me some time. I don't have many copies, and I have to order some more. But I will, as soon as I can, I will make them available on my website, warrendavisshop.square.site, which you so kindly put up in part 1.
Absolutely.
And I'll make them available for autographed copies if people want.
Yeah, several people have been asking, so I think you'll do well with that.
They will be available, and I'll ship them out as soon as I can. And then I'm going to, I feel like next year for me is just going to be a lot about publicity and just trying to spread the word. That's really what I hope, is that the word gets spread. So at least among the retro gaming community, people are aware of it if they're interested. Yeah. I found with my self-published book, it was really difficult. The book was out and most people had not heard of it. And I'm not a self-promoter. I'm not a marketing guy. So this is going to be a little bit of a new a new world for me.
I assume having an actual publisher, part of what they take, I'm assuming they're taking their cut for, is to actually do the promotion and get the word out and do things like that publishers review and things like that. So hopefully you'll have that as at least a starting point. And the retro gaming community is so rabid anyway. Once we open up a couple of these shows, right, and you can go to the Classic Gaming Expo or any of these other ones, you're going to do so well with it, I think, because it's such a good book. And
well, I'm very excited to bring it to some shows.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, it's almost surreal. Probably more for you than for me, but I've got these digital pictures of your book, and you go to Amazon, and it's not a real picture of the book; it's a picture of the cover art. But now it's real. I mean, it's really, really real. Look at it; it's awesome. It's
CGI.
Gorgeous looking too. Not CG. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a real book. That's a real for you kids born in the 2000s. This is what we call a book.
Pages and everything.
It looks really good. See, honestly, I don't mind reading digitally, but I would rather have the book. I would have rather have consumed your book that way. And when my copy gets here, I'll probably go through it again because it was just a good book. All right. Well, listen, I know I've got you for a limited time, and we've got still so much to talk about. So in part 1, we covered Q Bert, your early years. We started leading up to Us versus Them, and I tried to shoehorn some in there, and I didn't want to do that title disservice because it's really an important title, and I've got like 10 questions to discuss about it. So if you're okay, we'll circle back. We're not going to go back to the other stuff. They can listen to part 1 if they want to, but I would love to go back and have a fresh start on Us versus Them, because I think it's a brilliant work of art, and it deserves our time. So just to kind of recap, we'll get right back where we were. So we started talking about 1983, and Dragon's Lair came out, and drastically, even though for a short period of time, sort of changed what people were thinking about video games. You'd walk in and you see Pac-Man, which is, okay, it's Pac-Man, and then you look over here and there's this beautiful Don Bluth fully animated cartoon. You're playing this movie and everybody was crowding around it, and, it was raining cats and dogs, whatever. But that was, you say in the last interview that Dragon's Lair wasn't really your cup of tea. You didn't like the interactive movie piece of the equation, right? You wanted something a little more interactive, and that's where Us versus Them came in.
Yeah, it's not that what I didn't like about it was sort of the roteness of the, push here, it was all very timed, which of necessity, because it was basically a cartoon. So you just had to make very simple decisions. So it wasn't, it was nice that it was interactive. For me, it just wasn't interactive enough.
Sure. That's fair.
And we had a system at Gottlieb that we made for Mach 3. It was really our regular hardware. Okay. All we did was in our regular original hardware, same hardware as Q Bert, Reactor, Mad Planets. One of our engineers, Dave Pfeiffer, replaced the background plane of our system with Laserdisc footage. So it was exactly the same hardware. So basically we were capable of putting 16 by 16 pixel sprites on top of Laserdisc footage, whatever that footage might be. And for Mach 3, which did incredibly well in the arcades, it was a huge success. That was flying footage where you had a choice of doing, first person or first third person. You were behind the plane and you're shooting at things, or bombing runs where you're looking straight down and you're trying to hit targets, So we already had that. And they were looking for a kit to go into Mach 3 after, the Mach 3 had its run, which games did. They were popular for a while and then they kind of faded off. And Dennis Nordman came to me. Dennis Nordman, of course, of fame as a pinball designer, still designing pinball games today. He was working at Gottlieb at the time as a game designer, and he came to me this idea of doing a science fiction, like a B movie science fiction kind of thing. And I was immediately fascinated. I love science fiction. I love B movies. I grew up on those crazy 1950s sci-fi movies. And I thought that was a great concept. no idea how to do it, no idea how to make it work. And, we talked about a lot of crazy things. Originally it was going to be all these weird angles like a movie. It would keep changing angles like a movie. And I just thought, how's the player going to keep track? You're aiming at something and all of a sudden you cut to a different angle. It's
right.
not good. It's not a good thing. But we worked all those things out eventually. And the thing that became the big stumbling block for us versus them in the development of it was schedule, because there was a big show there was always a big show in the fall, and then there was another one in the spring, and we didn't make the show that we wanted to make. I think we knew we weren't going to make the fall show, but we were hoping to make the spring show. And maybe I'm getting that right. I have to go check my book.
Go check the book.
That's what I researched for my book. But so yeah. But the thing is, we had to get it ready for a show, and it just wasn't going to be ready. So there was and I worked tirelessly for days to get it ready for the show in a simplified form. It wasn't going to be the full game. It was going to be like the first 6 levels or something.
Shareware version.
A
shareware version. If you like the game, you can unlock the rest of it.
a little more than that, but yeah, it was basically going to be whatever we could do realistically. I busted my ass, and then like 2 days before the show, I was told, "Yeah, we're not going to take it to the show." So I was crushed. But as it turned out, it just gave us more time to finish the game, and the game itself, once we put it out on Cointest, it tested phenomenally. It was like it really poised to be another huge hit for us. And then,
it wasn't.
It wasn't because
didn't get the chance.
The Laserdisc games were found to be not reliable out in the field, and people canceled. The distributors canceled their orders with Gottlieb. Now, the distributors, those were Gottlieb's, clients. Gottlieb built the machines and sold them to these distributors, and they're the ones who put them out in arcades or wherever. So that was a really tough blow. Gottlieb even filed a lawsuit against their distributors, their own customers, because they canceled their orders, and it was just a really horrible time, not only for Gottlieb, but I think for the entire video game industry. And then there was the crash, the video game crash shortly after, which was partly fueled by Laserdiscs, I think. And also just by the saturation of games that were out there. It was just oversaturated. Everybody was making video arcade games suddenly, and a lot of them just weren't that good. And anyway.
So, in the book, I was really hoping, because I'm a huge fan of Laserdisc interactive gaming in general, right? In my last show, I showed you my little Dragon's Lair machine, and I've even worked with Digital Leisure time to time, helping them try to perfect their emulation or their recreations of these games, because I played them so much and these are really near and dear to my heart. So I was kind of hoping when I read the book, you would talk a little bit more about the challenges or even the sort of the day-to-day operations of actually having to write a video game against a Laserdisc. I mean, because you said it's your hardware, right? It was Gottlieb's hardware. So no stranger there, expert. Were there any sort of challenges with interfacing with that sort of, it's random access, right? But there's a time delay. It has seek times. What were some of the kind of maybe cool challenges, if you can remember any, about integrating your hardware with this? It was a Pioneer deck, right, at the time, Pioneer Laserdisc? Yeah. Right. You got any stories about that?
I mean, honestly, I feel like the hardware design was such that it made it pretty easy for the programmers.
Okay.
We would, and again, I think the way the game was sort of designed, it made it easy for the programmers. We had basically minute-long scenes, right, which would start with maybe a few seconds of a story, and then there'd be a cut to a flying footage scene, a cutaway to a little interstitial gag, usually during each scene, and then maybe a little scene at the end, or maybe not. And we about a minute of gameplay in every level, and all we had to do was pick where we wanted to go on the Laserdisc and seek to that point. and as long as you weren't seeking very, very far on the Laserdisc, your seek time wasn't that, noticeable. And I just thought it was pretty easy. I don't remember any challenges in getting the Laserdisc to work. I mean, if there were any, I've long forgotten them. By the way, I don't retain pain in my brain. So if something was a chore and I got past it, I might just forget it. I might just try to not remember it. But
I was thinking.
I don't remember anything like that.
Yeah, because I was thinking. Like, again, I'm an amateur developer. I've released a couple of titles, so I've got some basic game coding background. For me, I think it would be really challenging to code these sort of sequences, even a minute at a time, because you had footage, right? Or you didn't have footage for a while, so maybe you had some animatics or some storyboards or something like that. What were you coding against? Because in the book, and we're going to get back to this too, but you mentioned that it was up until like the very end before the final Laserdiscs were pressed. How were you deriving footage for development time?
We had, as I recall it, we had test pressings of a few levels.
Okay.
So once we got any flying footage back, we were able to throw like a test disc in. It wasn't complete, but it had a few levels. And the thing, the beauty about the design is that the backgrounds were kind of irrelevant.
Right.
All we had to know is, are we in a scene? Or are we in flying footage? So,
okay.
If we cross a certain frame threshold, we know where we started the actual flying level, and I've got to put the graphics up. And if we cut to an interstitial, I have to take the graphics away for a second, right, and put them back on when the interstitial is over. But that's about it. I mean, like I said, it was fairly easy to go from. And the thing is, I could develop the game without any Laserdisc.
I was just going to say, you probably didn't even need it. It wasn't even there. I mean,
yeah, the beauty about the design is that the gameplay is that the computer graphics were overlaid over the flying footage, but you didn't interact with that flying footage.
Right.
So you didn't have to track. Let me take that back. The caveat to that is the forest level.
Yeah, hold up on the forest level. Don't get too deep in that. I got some questions about that we'll lead into.
You were asking about it.
I know. I'm sorry. Go ahead, and I'll adjust my question. Go ahead.
Well, you were saying, so the forest level did require, and actually the mothership levels required interacting with the disc, but I programmed those later. So I had and the thing is, we had all these different angles. There was a first person angle. There was a sort of above third person angle. There was side scrolling. So I had plenty that I could do before we actually got the flying footage back. And then, like I said, in the later levels, and we never used animatics as far as I know, although the special effects company in California that was doing the mothership levels for us, they did give us some test footage of just literally black and white pieces of cardboard. They were zooming in, and there were different like different shaped and oriented holes, and you had to align as you're going through the mothership. You had to align your ship to those holes, or else you would crash. Very similar to the forest level, but in the forest level, a tree would come up right in the middle of the screen in some portion, and you had to avoid it. So that was a little easier because they were just vertical lines, and all I had to do is detect if your ship was within a boundary between two vertical lines. It was the math on that was very, very easy.
That's so cool. So, if you watch, if my listeners are familiar with the game, or you go look it up on YouTube and you watch it, you might kind of assume that maybe you guys grabbed like an old B movie or something like that, and you chopped it up, and maybe you inserted a couple of scenes here and there to kind of fill in some gaps. But you guys started from scratch, right?
Oh yeah, we realized pretty early on that we were not going to find the footage that we needed anywhere. I mean, we needed very specific types of shots, and they needed to go on for a long time. I mean, a minute, right. If you think about it, a minute's a long time. And these scenes were sped up because I don't know if you've ever taken movie footage out of a plane, but it does not feel like you're moving. It's very slow looking. So we had to speed these things up about 5 times. So to get a 1 minute, run, you had to fly for 5 minutes, and then we would speed that up to a minute.
So one of the things that fascinated me about your involvement with Us Versus Them is the fact that you had this acting background, and it's kind of funny that this project seemed to be like this perfect marriage of developer and actor. And you mentioned these cute little fun interstitial cutscenes, and I know the book goes into great detail, but I really, really enjoyed your stories about being involved and your friend the actor. And without going into a lot of detail, can you tell us a little bit about it, and then they can fill it in with the book?
Well, yeah, we hired actors because we had, live action scenes and stuff. So the guy who played Commander Tracy, the sort of the hero of the story in the control room, was a friend of mine from my acting class. And we also got people, a variety of people. We had auditions and everything, and hired people to do the little interstitial comedy bits. And then, the funny thing is I didn't, even though I was studying acting at the time, the reason this was a great project for me was because my desire to be a filmmaker. I was much more interested in filmmaking than I was in acting. So that's where I kind of stuck my nose in. And ultimately I did all the editing for the entire game. Which I love doing. I mean, I was.
And you did some direction too, right? I mean, I remember in the book you mentioned that you were just the director would just look at you like, "Is this okay?" Or
yeah, I kind of weaseled my way in. Like first I would just be like, I'd pull him over and I go, can we do something a little bit more interesting? We get a little bit more of an angle, or and then I would sort of like go, can I just say something to the actors? And then eventually he was just looking over to me. He was just going like, what do you want to do?
That's so awesome. And so let's go back to that forest level, because I thought it was, as I was reading through your book, it seemed like everything, I don't know if I believe in the concept of fate, or we're predestined to do this, or we're predestined to do that, or things will step in and things just happen as they should. Your life seems to be filled with these moments. At least that's how the book presents it, where like, something kind of bad happened, but then this other thing came right along and everything was solved. And the forest level was one of those things where when I got to that part, the whole production of the game seemed kind of charmed, honestly. I mean, with finding the movie theater to actually watch like dailies in, or it seemed like everything just happened. You had the right person at the right time in the right place, but the forest level really seemed to be a good example of that.
Well, I don't know about charmed. I would have been completely lost trying to get anything done. But we had this, as I talk about in the book, we had this. We found this Steadicam operator, and he just kind of rolled in like a snowplow into Kalamazoo, Michigan, clearing everything out of his way. So we got what we wanted. I mean, he was so bold and fearless, and I was like stunned. I would like watch him in awe. He would just he called up a theater owner, he was calling up any theater owner he could find and say, yeah, we're making a movie here, and we need to watch our dailies. Can we use your theater before you open to watch our dailies? And he found somebody who said yes. And the next thing you know, we're sitting, and the film was shipped back to Chicago, developed overnight, and shipped back in the morning. And next thing you know, we're sitting in a movie theater, an empty movie theater, watching our footage on this big screen. It was crazy, but he was just fearless. And he was the guy hanging out of the helicopter when we flew over Chicago. And he's just, shooting everything we needed. And it was 26 degrees below zero.
Oh,
we were just freeze. I mean, I because we had to take turns sitting up in the front of the helicopter. That's the only way I stayed alive, is because I got to sit up where the heater was. Yeah. Oh my God. It was crazy. It was a crazy time. I don't know about charmed, but it was a wonderful time.
Yeah. I mean, in the forest was like, the forest was sort of like not an extra level, but something you weren't really originally planning on, right? That sort of fell into place, just, again, kind of charmed.
Well, Well, it was one of those things where one of the guys who was who helped develop it, one of the design team, if you will, Dave Faust, said he knew of this forest in Michigan where the trees were planted in rows, and Return of the Jedi had literally just come out in 1983 that summer. And we were shooting this later in 1983, and it was just like, let's do a forest level. Just it's just a blatant ripoff of Return of the Jedi. But yeah,
that's so crazy.
We found a way to make it work.
So I know in the book you basically say you have no clue what this cost. I'm sitting here in my head trying to add up helicopter rides, jets over Arizona, film overnighted to Chicago. I'm trying to come up with a number, and it's not. I can't compute it. You have no idea, right?
I have absolutely no idea. I was not in charge of money. I was literally just there to design and program.
And nobody came to you and said, dude, no forest level for you. We're not going to fly you out. So you were completely on independent ops. There was no executive producer chasing you down, telling you to shoot fast or nothing. It was just the money kept flowing and you were good.
I was not controlling the purse strings. I have no idea. I'm assuming it was Rich Tracy, who is our art director, Gottlieb's art director, overseeing the entire art department. I had nothing to do with it. And the only thing I remember is being told that we were not going to the show. We were not going to the show. So go home, get some rest, and then come back after the show and finish the game.
Oh my God. So a lot of you sort of alluded to one of the reasons why Us versus Them didn't make it out was because of the problems with the Laserdisc. And you and I talked a little bit, I believe, offline about the problems that were being had. So there was a problem with Laserdisc reliability, right? And you had told me some interesting stories that I hadn't heard regarding why this was a problem. I knew that there was, because I worked at an arcade that had a Dragon's Lair, and I remember the operator of that arcade, bitching all the time that it was down, or he had to replace this or he had to replace that. But it was making him a whole ton of money. So, I mean, he paid the money, but he was not happy about it. But you had mentioned, like there were, I don't want to steal your wool, but what were some of the things that people could do to screw with that Laserdisc in the arcade itself?
Well, you just bang on the side of the cabinet. The Laserdisc it's working kind of like a record player. Yeah. Except it's not making contact. There's a stylus, but it's sending out a little laser beam, and it's reading the little pits in the disc and sending ones and zeros back. But again, if you slam that thing hard enough, and you can make it skip. And once it skips, it loses track of where it's supposed to be, and then it's gone. It's lost, and you get a blue screen because the Laserdisc has nothing to tell you, and then you go to complain to the arcade owner, and he gives you your money back and resets the game. I mean, that's if that happens all the time, that's not good.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned, this is the part that cracked me up, is you played the game up till you were getting ready to die and lose your last life, or you were out of game, and then you just smack the side of the thing, blue screen it, and get your money back. So it was like playing for free.
Exactly. Yeah, not a good business model.
I just can't believe that nobody in quality control was sitting there going, hey, maybe we should put some, I don't know, absorbent material in here, or put it on a
they did
all that.
There was some cushioning in there. It just I mean, if you have access to the side of a cabinet and you have a foot, man, the little foam's not going to help.
So terrible. Yeah, and I think that really sort of sealed the fate of Laserdisc, and it wasn't cheap enough, I guess, to store video on wafers or anything at that point. So,
so no such thing.
Yeah. So when Gottlieb, or should I say Milestar, which is, by the way, the worst possible name ever, and I guess we're not alone based on what I read in the book. When they closed down, how big of a blow was that to you? I mean, I know you were crushed about Us versus Them not getting out, but I don't know how emotionally involved you were by then with Gottlieb or Milestar at the moment. You say you were getting unhappy towards the end of your tenure anyway. It sounded like you were being pelted with offers, right? So from a financial standpoint,
let's back up a second.
Okay.
Gottlieb did not immediately shut down after Us versus Them. Us versus Them happened, and then the company went on for months.
Okay.
Maybe 5 or 6 months. I was moving on to other things, but the reason I became unhappy is because, it was sort of a natural progression that had to happen, which is that too many people were hired who were not coming out with games that could be released. And so the original philosophy of, hey, we just hire people and let them do their thing, and
Right.
and hope we get some hits. It wasn't working. They had, because they started to hire a lot of programmers, and they became a little heavy around the middle with people who just weren't producing games. It wasn't all the programmers' faults, because the market, like I said, had become saturated. So it's and people had gotten used to things. So when video games like skyrocket to popularity, you saw this wide variety of things. So if a lot of people are sort of coming out with the same thing or a slight variation on the same old thing, it's like, yeah, I've seen that before. So, and there were no new technological breakthroughs other than Laserdiscs, which we found out wasn't going to cut the mustard. So, so it was sort of a downward slide from there. So the first thing they did is they hired a middle manager to basically crack the whip on the programmers. And that created a kind of a stifling environment. I think a lot of people resented it. I'm not saying it didn't have to be done. I think it did have to be done from a business standpoint, but it wasn't fun. So just the whole environment became just a little bit more oppressive, and it was about deadlines and about you had to pitch your game, and you couldn't just get a game approved. And so it was a little bit stifling, and that's the environment that we were in. And then I don't even know if that's the reason the company folded, because Columbia was owned by Coca-Cola. So all of these decisions were happening at a much, much higher level. If I was to speculate, I would say Coca-Cola didn't care much about owning a pinball company, and so pinball was down because of video games. Then video games became down because of the crash in '84. And they were like, what are we doing holding on to this piece of garbage? Let's just cut it loose. And so they made the decision to end the company. You could feel it in the air. Those last few weeks, there were like conversations in hushed tones, and, people were having meetings, and, people were going away to meetings, and you'd be like, ooh, what's that? What are they talking about? So it was a weird time at the end. Yeah.
So, I mean, and you've been constantly being pelted with headhunter calls and things like that. I mean, it didn't sound like there was ever a time where, like, from a fiscal point of view, you were really concerned about what your next gig was going to be. But like when you left, were you ready to go, from Gottlieb at that point in time, or was it, did it crush your psyche a little bit?
It was tough. It's I don't think it's not any different, I think, than being in a terrible marriage, but you struggle to hold on to it, or living in a neighborhood that becomes terrible around you, and yet you don't want to leave because it's your home. It's a similar dynamic there. I really believed I was going to work at Gottlieb for the rest of my life. I thought this was my lifelong job. I had that much devotion to the company and to the people I worked with. And so it was crushing. It was an absolute crushing thing. Even though things weren't great, there's always the hope that things will turn around, things will pick up, we'll weather the storm.
Yeah.
Didn't have a chance to do that.
Oh, well, let's move on to different oceans then. So I found a really, and this is probably just me completely reading into things, but you moved on to data logics. This is really fascinating to me because this doesn't exist really anymore, this type of data processing service, right? From my point of view as the reader, I suddenly felt like there was almost a shift in what you were doing, right? Because when you were brought on there, you were implementing graphic import formats, right? You weren't actually coding this application or writing games. You were extending it with sort of almost like a graphics API, right?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, so their product was basically a word processor. We have word processors now. We don't need anything. But back then, computers, personal computers, were you know, like the IBM PC came out in 1981. This was 1984. So, you know, PCs had been around for like 3 years. And they were not very memory. They didn't have a lot of memory. Windows, I'm not even sure if Windows existed. Everybody used DOS, the original PC operating system. So there were no word processors. You just didn't have a graphical means of communicating, you know, documents. And so Datalogix was a service where, you know, they would maintain your documents. And part of that is if you needed some kind of graphic, you know, it would have to be stored in some sort of form, some sort of graphic format. And then we needed to be able to display that when we print it. So it was, we were basically, and a lot of those graphic formats were proprietary. So it's not like there was a thing that showed you how the data was stored in a graphics file. Somebody would generate a graphics file, and we had to basically, hack it and just
like
look at the data and figure out, oh, this code means this, and this code means, you know, this. It was kind of fun. It was kind of fun work.
And as I progressed through the book and I started seeing what you were doing with Williams, and we're going to talk much more about your graphic tools and things there, it almost seemed like this was almost like an opening salvo for not a change, because you still did coding later on, but it sounded like a lot of your contributions seemed to sort of shift to graphic tools. And I'm really excited about talking about these graphic tools with you too, in general. But did you feel that, or is it my interpretation as a reader, just having this 30,000 foot view, that you sort of kind of shifted directions at that point and you were sort of becoming more graphically intensive? Is that what spawned? Because in Gottlieb, your guy Jeff was doing all the artwork for you. You weren't really engaged in graphics other than how to get them on the screen and collide with them and all that stuff. So was this?
Well, I did it. You know, if there was some simple thing, you know, to do, then I would get involved in making graphics. I was capable of plopping pixels in a grid, which is basically what our tools were. But I mean, I didn't need to make any tools at Gottlieb. And, you know, and even at Gottlieb, I did write the diagnostic package. So, you know, every game has operator diagnostics. So I did work on that for the Laserdisc system, because we had some specific tests that were needed for the Laserdisc system. And I think I even did something. I worked on that kind of stuff for Q Bert, and maybe even, I don't think Reactor, but maybe Q Bert. I started working on diagnostics in a way, in some small way. But I just, you know, tools is something that you did because you needed to do them, you know?
Yeah.
So to me, it wasn't necessarily a shift in focus. It was just doing what needed to be done.
Gotcha.
Same thing at Williams. Like when I was first hired at Williams, one of my first projects was sort of revamping their art tools. I think they were moving from, you know, they had a single plane system they called System 4, and then Joust 2 was done on a system with a background they called System 6. So, you know, with, you know, more planes, you needed different tools. There was a need to sort of streamline the process of getting your images into the game. So that's something I was working on, but it was all fun for me. I mean, it was a challenge, and it was something that needed to be done. And if I had an interesting idea that I thought, oh, I could do this in an interesting way, or it was just fun for me.
So it became clear in the book, like I could almost feel the heat radiating off the pages. Like you felt like you'd won the lottery when you got the call from Williams. I know, right? I wish I had my copy. I could be holding it up periodically. This is all I got is back here. You called Williams your Emerald City, which I thought was awesome. And you were so impacted, according to the book, that you don't even remember the interview or the time until you were like walked into your office at Williams, because it was that much of a life-changing moment for you. Do you remember anything since writing the book between the time that you kind of got that interview and you went to work for Williams?
No. I don't. I really don't. I don't know why either. I just don't. I don't have a memory of my interview there.
The dopamine overrode. Yeah.
And of course,
well, I thought maybe.
I remember the walk to the office because I did it every day. It was
right.
It was every day. You'd go in the main door, you'd say hi to the receptionist, you'd get in, you'd be buzzed into where all the front offices were, and you'd kind of make a little jog. Then you go into the plant. You had to walk all the way through the plant itself to get to the back, and yeah. I mean that was like an everyday thing.
And so in the past, you talked about some of your interviews being like, I don't need this gig, whatever. If they give it to me, whatever. I bet with Williams, were you tied up in knots in your stomach? I can't even imagine like going to the Emerald City and seeing the Wizard and not being a complete wreck the night before or even the day of. But were you just all calm and cool about it?
Well, first of all, yeah, when I interviewed at Gottlieb, my attitude was I could take it or leave it because I had made the decision, as we talked about last time, and as I talked about in the book, I had made the decision to leave engineering. I was like done with engineering. So that was where that came from. But, after working at Gottlieb for years and making the games I did, and then working at Datalogix and being out of the industry for a year or a year and a half, I was totally excited about coming. I was desperate to come back. I was like, are you kidding? I think I say, even in the book, I got that call from the headhunter at Datalogix. How would you like to get back into video games? I didn't have to hesitate. The answer was yes, yes. So
yes.
And of course, Williams. Yeah, Williams was, just
it's Williams, man.
golden beacon of amazing games.
I wasn't even a developer, and I know that Williams was the golden chalice, man.
Yeah,
that's incredible. So, go ahead.
Anyway, but then of course, then the reality. Okay, I'm sorry, my computer's making all these.
Yeah, noises. I think I've got. No one wants to bother me. I haven't been bothered all day until we started recording, and now everybody wants my attention.
Yeah,
leave me alone. I'm busy.
You know how computers are these days. They tell you things that you couldn't care less about. They just like, but they
and when something important comes along, it's like, oh well, we did focus assist for you. You didn't need to know that.
Yeah. Anyway, so coming to Williams, the department had been decimated by the crash at that point. It was really like a bare bones, a skeletal team in the dead zone. So. Yeah.
So you started working there in 1986, which was after that big crash in the 80s. And, it's funny, you started to talk about it, but the book paints this really colorful picture. And you've got a really good talent for painting pictures of, like, environments and situations. I just wanted to let you know that. But you'd mentioned about the offices, that the Williams offices looked at, like, at the time with the abandoned cafeteria, because video game crash, right? But I assume, despite Williams not being in all of its glory, it was just surreal as hell the first time to walk in there. Like, I'm sure they gave you a tour or something, but like as an employee, I work at Williams, and you walked through, even though it was kind of, there was no cafeteria or anything, but it was surreal as hell to be part of that legacy. No?
Yeah, no, I was thrilled to be there. It was fantastic.
So you mentioned your first project at Williams was completing Joust 2 with Christina Donofrio. Is that right?
Yeah.
I hate mispronouncing people's names. How much of that project was completed before you got there? And the listeners can read the book to get all the details about that, but it was clear I didn't feel like you were really happy about the Joust 2 project in general.
Well, that's not entirely true. I the impression I tried to leave, and maybe I didn't succeed there, but it's just that I didn't feel particular ownership to it. It wasn't my game, so it doesn't mean I didn't want to work on it. Joust. Listen, Joust and Q Bert were always in some way related in my mind because of that video games article from Video Games Magazine. Which I again talk about in the book. That there was an article that compared Joust and Q Bert, not compared, but mentioned Joust and Q Bert as American-made games when all of the games, the hit games, the popular games, were from Japan. So here's me at Gottlieb and John Newcomer at Williams making these two games that are suddenly huge successes about the same time. So to come to work at Williams and to work with John, who, and this is the crazy other thing, which is in the book too, but John had worked at Gottlieb for a short period of time. So I had, after Joust, he left Williams and came to Gottlieb for a short time. But anyway, so now I'm back at Williams and I'm working with John on Joust 2. That was like an amazing thing. It's just
that is pretty cool.
It just it wasn't my game. It was and it wasn't even my programming job because another programmer had done all of the basic work and we were just sort of finishing it up.
And I think that's what I was kind of alluding to was like, if you come in early into a project, you have a chance to kind of make it your own and put your own spin on the ball, a little English there. It didn't sound like, it sounded like you were there to just, like you said, write the documentation, tidy up, finish it, but you didn't. And you mentioned too, and I hate to give too much of the book away, but you'd also mentioned, and we all know, those of us who've played Joust 2, which I have, that it's a Tate or vertical implementation of a game that, damn it, it needed to be in a horizontal orientation. And I mean, you can't be blamed one way or the other for that, because I'm assuming that decision was made long before you got there.
Well, that was a management decision from day one. Yeah. But listen, people come to me and tell me all the time how much they love Joust 2 and that
really
that game doesn't get enough love. There's a lot of people out there who are fans of Joust 2. So obviously something about it works.
I guess so. I'm going to guess I go sit in the corner or something because I just, and I didn't have any of this backstory, but I've always wondered, like from the beginning of time when I first saw it, interesting choice. Why would they make this a vertical game like this? That doesn't compute. So now we have the backstory. The answer's in the book
to find out.
You must read the book now. So what about working with Christina? Now that's the only time I heard her name in the book was during the Joust 2 stuff. Was there any friction coming into a project? I mean, you didn't really talk about what her part of the project was. She didn't feel like you were coming and stomping on feet or anything? How did that dynamic work out?
No. We were both brought in to finish the project after the original program was let go.
Okay.
So we were on equal footing, and we just sort of split the work up.
Okay. So she wasn't there as part of the original project, and you joined after John, right, had left. So she came in at the same time as you.
John was not the name of the programmer who left, but that's.
I'm sorry.
John Newcomer is the designer. John designed it and did the graphics for it. There was a programmer who had been working on it who was let go.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that clears it up then.
The team was basically John and this other programmer, and then he was let go, and then Christina and I came in to sort of finish the game.
It sounds like there's an interesting story there, but I won't put you on the spot to talk about that. But yeah, I think. Yeah, I thought it was interesting, and maybe, I'm going to have to go back and look at Joust 2 with a slightly different appreciation now. One, knowing that you were involved in it, because I really didn't know that before I read the book. I mean, I knew that your name was attached to it, but again, I'm on the camp of I didn't see the love in Joust 2, but I'm gonna have to go back and check it out now. So I alluded earlier that it seemed like your career sort of shifted by working with these graphic tools. And so at Williams, you were involved with a lot of tools for development. And this began with extending the Williams Image Management Program, or WIMP, as part of your work with Joust 2. And we'll talk a little bit more about those tools later. But before that, let's talk about how you were involved with the digitizing graphics part. And this was one of those great urban legends that all Amiga users glommed onto because we wanted to think the Amiga was important. And so there was always like bulletin board posts and stuff like that talking about how like NARC was built with Amiga hardware, not with Amiga hardware, but Amigas were used to build the graphics, things like that. And so I know when we originally sort of talked on Twitter before these interviews, you had sort of set me straight going, no, we worked on some Amiga stuff early on, but it went out the door. Can we talk a little bit about that? And then you also created an algorithm for picking colors. And I'm fascinated by that as a sort of a developer and sort of a little logic-based guy. Could you elaborate on that too?
Okay, well, let's start with the Amiga. I mean, so I just got wind of this Amiga digitizer, and I just thought, oh, this sounds interesting. I think, we always knew at some point we were not going to always be limited to 16 colors. I figured, I think we knew resolution was going to change. Color resolution and pixel resolution were both going to change in the future. And just I was sort of thinking ahead and thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice to have movie quality or photographic quality images in a video game? So what would it take? And what it takes is a good enough, color resolution. You just need colors. Anyway, so I found out about this Amiga digitizer, and I decided to start, playing around with it. And management was all over it, and they were like, "Yeah, sure, buy one." So we got it. And the thing is, it wasn't very practical because you literally could only take a still image. That your subject couldn't be moving. So it was great for still lifes, and it had a color wheel. So you had to kind of rotate this thing and you get a little bit of the clear color. You get red, you get green, you get blue, whatever, and you filter out, and then the software would combine all of these colors into a full color image. And I think it had something like 4,096 colors or something like that. But if you took a little, if you pointed and you used a black and white camera, that's the other thing.
Right. Like a security camera, if I remember, with DigiView was that way. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, I just started playing around, understanding how digitization works, understanding how colors work. And part of that was because I knew we were never, in the near future, we were not going to have 4,096 colors or more than that. So then you had to start looking into how are you going to reduce colors. The idea is to get the best. And I think we kind of knew the next step up was going to be 256. So we were thinking ahead that, okay, we're going to have a 256 color system next. So then it became, well, how do you reduce an image that has up to 4,096 colors to one that looks like, to one that looks as good and only has 256. So that's why I started looking into these algorithms. And, there was no internet. You had to go to the library. So I went to the library and I would start researching technical manuals about computer graphics. So looking at what's being done in the universities, what kind of algorithms are being developed. And, there were a few at the time. They were not ideal or as complex as some of the algorithms we have today that are phenomenal, that really give you great results. But back then, there was like the median cut algorithm, and you had to you computed a color distance because you're in an RGB space. RGB is 3-dimensional, so you had to compute a distance from the actual color to a target color. And anyway, there were all these algorithms, and I just coded them up and tried them out, and it was again fun. It was kind of fun. I'm a computer geek, that's my job, so I enjoyed it. And I got some results, and the real thing that made it possible for us to get graphics into our games was the introduction of the Targa boards. So that was True Vision was a company, and they created these Targa boards. They created the Targa format. So if you ever see a TGA file, that's where it came from, Targa. And they had a series of 3 different boards. They had the sort of the souped up. The high end was the Targa board. There was a middle sort of ground with something called the ICB or image capture board. And then there was a smaller, lesser board that I think didn't even do digitization. It was called the VDA. And that was just like a graphics card to put in your computer. So the ICB became the board we bought. And the beautiful thing about this is it came with an SDK. It came with a software library of functions, so you could write your own software to control the board. And that was the beginning of WTarg, which is the software that I wrote to basically do what we needed. It let you grab frames, it let you select frames, it let you output the frames in a format that your game code can be incorporated with your game code. Anyway. Yeah, I'm getting too technical here. That's why I try. No, listen.
It's so funny.
I try to keep it.
It's your mouth to my ears. My next question, and I swear this is true. I can hold it up right now. Is I noticed that you had mentioned something about you had dreamed about real interactive movies that could bridge the rich storylines of games like Infocom Text Adventures, which boy, how do you explain that to somebody that was born in 2010, right?
They're still out there.
They are. I still play them. Are you kidding? Yeah, you can run them in a browser, right? That's really cool. They're like Infocom libraries that you can go online and you can play any one of these games, probably illegally because they're probably still copyright, but you can actually just do it in a browser and play these Infocom games.
Yeah.
But you had sort of dreamed about being able to do that with these high level of graphic fidelity. And I actually wrote down here the WTARG software you created for the True Vision capture boards was really the first step in that direction. And so, right now, don't worry about getting technical. My listeners will love it. So, the one person that I'm pretty much down to the last person that I never really got to interview that I felt like is missing from my retro gaming radio world was Eugene Jarvis. And I'd reached out to him a few times. I guess listen, busy guy, didn't know who the hell I was. I get it. Never got an interview with him, but the guy's always fascinated me. And I know that you talk about him in the book. So I have a little note here. Tell us something about working with Eugene Jarvis that we don't know. What would be something interesting to know about that?
I don't know what you do know. So how do I know what you don't know?
Well, something, like everybody knows, like his involvement, with Williams and everything. But was the guy, I don't know. You get that kind of rock star status, and I've seen some of the rock stars in the gaming industry, and let's be honest, they kind of became ass hats, I guess, if you will. Did Eugene Jarvis have an ego? Was he like super cool to work with? Was he receptive to your ideas?
I would say he was super cool. He was just so self-assured, He knew what he liked and he knew what he thought was a good game and he knew what he knew what he wanted. So I don't feel it was an ego thing for him. He loved what he did and he had very strong ideas and he was in a position where he could get them into reality. So, he deserves all the praise that is heaped on him. But, he was he was a real easygoing kind of a guy. I mean, maybe a little eccentric in some ways, but, just kind of a goofy guy.
Genius and eccentricity don't usually tend to separate too far sometimes, right? They overlap in Venn diagrams. So
he was a genius. Yeah.
That's so cool. So I know you and Jarvis were on different teams, and he went on to do NARC while you were working on the tank game USSA. And I know you were really excited about USSA. I mean, it comes through in the book. This was your baby, and you loved it, and you cared for it. But I wonder, though, did you ever harbor any kind of regret or resentment for not being part of NARC, or were you kind of secretly glad you got left out of that? Because you did say you did have some concern about the violence in the title and where that responsibility may take video gaming.
Well, look, okay, so I'm the Q Bert guy, right? I'm my idea of an experience that I want to create for people, NARC would not be that. Okay, that doesn't mean I can't work on a title that because I've worked on titles that were I guess more high testosterone, if you want to call it that, but. I don't have a problem working on those games. And my only problem with NARC, and it wasn't even a problem, it was just a question. It was, it's the question that Jeff Goldblum asks in Jurassic Park. Just because we can, does that mean we should? That's all. I was just asking the question. But as far as, so no, I didn't have any regrets about not being on the NARC team because, I was happy to be on my own team with John Newcomer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we were developing a game that I really was excited about. The thing is, while we were developing the system, the hardware and the software, I did contribute because I basically Eugene wrote the generic operating system and I wrote the generic display system. So we actually both contributed to the core of the system, and then we both went our separate ways and worked on our separate games and then modified both of those things as we needed. But
so the core hardware and the operating system and all the low level stuff between NARC and USSA were the same hardware platform overall, other than once they broke into their own
Yeah, pretty much. Like I said, the display system and the operating system are the two things that you want to have in place, and then everything else becomes game related. But you might need to tweak
Yeah.
either or both of those things for the particular needs of your game. But we had a starting point. That was the important thing.
So, how bad of a blow was it? I mean, I know because I read the book, but I'm trying to tease the audience a little bit. How bad of a
I,
blow was it when USSA was canceled? How did it affect you personally? And as it's not didn't get selected, so to speak,
Mhm.
does it exist in any form that we can see it, video or cocktail napkin renderings, anything like that? Because I'm
I
really curious after reading the book. I wanted to see this thing, man, with what you were working on.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm not aware of anything that exists anywhere.
Uh,
What I did for my self-published book is I created sort of like a little mock-up in Photoshop of
oh,
just an
that's cool.
idea of what the screen sort of looked like. Very vaguely, just but the thing is, we had digitized images and we had enough colors to do justice to a sort of generic ground. But John Newcomer had made all these fantastic models. He modeled houses, like suburban houses, and a 7-Eleven and a McDonald's, and we had a top-down view, and we shot these images, and I just felt like photographically it looked phenomenal on screen. And of course the vehicles, there were tanks, where the turrets moved independently of the direction of the tank, and then there were these 4x4 trucks that the player had that you were controlled with a steering wheel and a gas pedal, and then you had the rocket launcher in the back where you could stop and actually start controlling this rocket. Anyway, I just thought it was a really fun thing, and it was starting to come together. But yeah, I was absolutely crushed when it was canceled. I really thought the two things I thought: one is that it would make a great game if we were allowed to finish it, and two, I didn't think we needed to. I didn't think we were competing with NARC. I mean, it's like, what's wrong with having two games, right? Or even if it's done, hold on to it for 6 months and let NARC run its course, and then
Yeah,
and then. So
I was completely. And did you ever get a resolution or a disposition on what or
well, I
why
mean,
that decision was?
there I know that there were people in the company who were not fans of the game. There were some vocal people
Oh,
who were not fans of the game, and they had some sway, and but I couldn't tell you if that's why it happened or not. I really don't know.
and
Um,
you don't think there was like an unspoken competitive. Well, we're going to set these two teams on fire. We're going to let them go, and we're just going to pick whichever one we like the best at the end. Do you think that it started that way, or do you think it migrated that way because of
I,
some
I
internal
don't like
selection?
speculating when I have no information, so
Fair
I
enough.
prefer not to speculate. I've speculated enough or too
That's
much.
fair.
No,
That's
really,
fair.
I really don't know, and so any kind of speculation on my part can be misinterpreted as truth, but it's not. I don't
Yeah.
know. I really don't know.
Yeah, I have trouble believing that they would throw away a second team's all. I mean, I don't know how long was that? A month, 3 months, a year? What was that time frame?
Well, as I recall, it was at least a few months. It would have been
Okay.
maybe 3 or 4 months. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even that, it just seemed, it just, I question the concept of chucking something with that much development time. And I assume it was playable at some point. I mean, you guys had a more or less
Well, it
working
was
model
getting
of
there. I mean,
everything.
it had
Yeah.
evolved. So it didn't start as a completely, fresh, finalized concept. It
Yeah.
evolved. Uh, yeah, it's just something that kept evolving, and because it was like, okay, do we have both trucks on the screen at the same time, or we have one image and then you zoom in and out? I remember there was a version where the screen, you'd get larger, and your camera would get higher or lower depending on where the two trucks were, because you could drive in opposite directions, and then it was like that became a problem. And so then it was like, let's do split screen. So we went with like a horizontal screen, and each player had their own view. So you know, if the two trucks were near, you'd see them in both halves, but you could drive off into your own area. So, there were trade-offs, and we were
cool.
working through those, which is part of the process. But yeah, we just never got to finish it.
That sucks. I would like to have seen that. That sounds cool. So, moving forward, you didn't really want to work on High Impact Football. Do you have any regrets there? Because it became pretty popular.
I have no regrets.
Later on. No regrets? Yeah, good.
The fact that a game that I didn't want to work on became popular, I mean, fantastic.
Doesn't affect you.
But I didn't want to work on it. So the fact, why would I want to spend months and months of my life working on something that I don't care about and then have it be successful? It's like, yeah.
That's good. I mean, that's a real, I mean, I would like to be able to say that if I had some sort of a fork in the road where it's like I could be part of a project I didn't really care about but was hugely successful, that I would have turned that down because I didn't want to do it. So bravo to you. I mean, a lot of us would like to say that, but I don't know if everybody would do it. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
At that point, I was like, listen, more power to Williams. I did not have animosity against anybody at Williams. It's just I had to realize that I wasn't going to be able to do something that I wanted to do here. And, at that point in my career, I felt, I probably should look for something where I can get to do what I want to do. And working on a football game just didn't get me jazzed. Yeah. Didn't get me
I wouldn't want to work on a football game either, for what it's worth. I I dig what I dig about High Impact Football is not the football part, but the testosterone piece of it. So, but once again, your semi-charmed kind of life delivered you back to Gottlieb roots with Gil Pollock, who purchased the charred remains of Gottlieb under the name of Premier Technology. And you reunited with your artist savant, Jeff Lee, and you were tasked with a full stack creation, hardware, software tools, and a game. And you state in the book you were completely confident you could do it. But man, I was just you mentioning what it is that they had tasked you with. That seemed like a really overwhelming task. Were there any challenges or issues? You just seemed to blow right through it. It's like, yeah, I'll do the full stack.
I mean, at that point in my career, I had learned everything I needed to do in order to do exactly what we needed. So,
That's awesome.
I didn't do the hardware design. That was not in my wheelhouse. But we had Jun Yum, who was the hardware designer for Gottlieb's hardware. So, it's like, I knew I didn't have to do everything. When you have a task in front of you, you don't always say, "Oh, I have to do everything." No, you put the team together. So you grab the people who know how to do what you need. And in this case, it was a team of people that I knew and respected. And so yeah, I had faith in that. And then Khan again. Khan. It's in the book, but Khan and Jun, Khan Yabamoto, also former Gottlieb employee, had started their own company called Pixel Lab. And so Pixel Lab was hired by Premiere to create the game and the system and all of that. And then once that was done, then I and Jeff would work on the game itself.
And so the Fly game rose from the ashes. And that ended up being the game Exterminator. So we talked about the Fly game. I love the whole story behind the Fly game. We talked about it a little bit in part one. The story's so good in the book, and I don't want to spoil a ton of stuff, but you talk about working with Jeff Lee on the graphics. I feel like there might be an interesting story between the two of you working on that game that maybe didn't make it in the book. Is there anything you'd like to extrapolate on that experience of working on Exterminator?
Are you accusing me of holding back on a good story?
I'm not accusing. I am suggesting that perhaps an interesting story to us may not have been a necessarily interesting enough story from you to put in the book. It sounded like you two, like I said in the part one of this interview, it sounded like you guys seemed like you were kind of close and you guys had a lot of good times together. You worked really well together. You bounced off of each other. I mean, in my tenure of work, there's only a handful of people I could say in my experience with work, with my vocation, that I could say what it looked like you guys had. So I'm really curious about how that relationship worked with you guys. And Exterminator really seemed like maybe there might have been, because you guys were working the late nights, you guys were talking about the graphics and all of the different stuff, which is in the book, right? But I was just curious if there was anything you wanted to share about that experience with him that maybe didn't make it in.
I don't think so. I think it's all in the book. Yeah, Jeff and I we had a very comfortable relationship. We worked on, we had worked on both Q Bert and Us Versus Them. We worked on the Lotto game, Lotto Fun, which, is also in the book. So, yeah, we just had a very comfortable relationship. I, completely respected his talent, his amazing talent. And I was just happy to have him on board. Yeah. It's Jeff it's just such a reliable guy that you know he's going to deliver, and you can talk about anything, you can bounce ideas, and that's what we did. We bounce ideas off each other.
So cool. Overall, though, Exterminator didn't sound like a particularly great period of time for you. You'd mentioned separation from your wife, a lot of pressure based on some early press, which I thought was really crappy, but it's in the book. You guys can read and commiserate a little bit. You compound that with the overall failure of the game, which you actually attribute to yourself, although I, as the reader, I didn't feel you bore any responsibility whatsoever, but that just might be my interpretation. That must have been really rough for you overall, and I had I had trouble getting my mind around how long this era was. So what was that time frame? I mean, it sounded you worked for like 2 years with Premiere, right? Was that all that whole time with Exterminator, or because I was trying to get a feel for the timing? Yeah.
It was developing the hardware, it was developing the software and the system tools, and then it was developing the game. So yeah, there was a lot that went into those 2 years. And of course, it's not only just developing the game, it was tuning the game, testing the game, then getting all the problems with the game, trying to fix them. So yeah, there was a lot going on in those 2 years, and there was some stress, but and ultimately, yes, I was disappointed that it wasn't a success. But it happens to everybody, right? I kind of, I wasn't happy about it, but I think I kind of took it in stride because it was what it was, and I don't think I was solely responsible. I think, I had failings. Some of the failings were mine, but, problems with the controller,
that was nutty.
That was nutty. The noise problems in the board, that was just something we all just sort of threw our hands up and until Jun was able to sort of tackle that and improve it. But it really took a while. And then the fact that Gil, announced the game would be ready long before he should have, then that just put an extra pressure on it that didn't have to be, so woulda, shoulda, coulda. There were a lot of things that kind of could have gone differently but didn't. So it is what it is.
Yeah, and I really while it wasn't necessarily like the great thing for you, obviously, in that 2 years, as the reader, I really liked the story, and I'm excited that the listeners will get to read that with all of those details, because I thought that was an interesting story to me.
Shane,
it's
Shane.
What's that?
15 minutes. It's 12:15.
Oh my goodness, are you serious? Oh no!
I know. Okay, it flies by. It flies by.
I might have to drop a little bit here. Okay, so let's move on. So once again, your life is a series of opportunity. Without skipping a beat, after Premiere, you joined Pixel Lab part-time. And I was dying when you essentially became the token white guy of that company. I was I told you that I was getting a CT scan the day I was reading your book, and I had to chug down all of this contrast dye. And when you mentioned that you were the white guy in the room or something like that, I did literally spit some dye out. So I wanted to share that story with you, because forever my CT scan will be related to your book, which take that for whatever it's worth. That seemed like a sweet gig, and you got to spend more time pursuing acting, and I get the feeling that the universe's pendulum sort of swung back after those Premiere Technology years, yeah?
Yeah, just things just seemed to be in the right place at the right time, and timing was everything back then, and then just things worked out.
Yeah, it's just your story amazes me, and I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but like every time there's the pendulum swings, it goes right back. So you went back to Williams in 1991, and that must have been completely surreal, because you say in the book you kept almost leaving the game industry over and over and over again, only to be pulled back in. And while we're on the topic, I mean, what a superstar squad to go back to, right? I mean, Eugene Jarvis, Sal DeVita, Ed Boon, John Tobias on the cusp of what would change the world, which honestly, Mortal Kombat, if you probably have not read anything that I've written, and that's okay, but I consider Mortal Kombat to be like that's the last pivot of video gaming to me. That's when the last big 1993 was sort of like that. I'm pretty sure it was 93. To me, Mortal Kombat was the last thing that set the world on fire. After that, everything has been kind of iterative, even Mortal Kombat itself. And what's more, you went back and you worked on like the arcade legend, which is Terminator 2. That's
Yeah.
What is that?
Again, just again brought in the middle of the project because a programmer left. He wasn't fired this time. He had left on of his own accord. But yeah, they needed somebody to step in who knew the hardware, who knew the systems, and that was me. They asked me, and I was absolutely thrilled to come back. I was so excited. And the department,
if you're a T2 fan, you have to read your book because it's awesome.
Yeah, sure. But the department had grown, so a lot more people, and all the the heroes of video gaming in the 90s were there or were about to be hired. So it was an exciting time. Yeah.
What I can't even imagine that. I mean, that just it blew my mind when you said you had gone back, and here where it was like everybody that sort of, I don't know, the third golden age or whatever. I don't know. It just was crazy. But what really got me, and you're going to tell me you can't say, and that's okay, because I'm going to talk about what's in the book. Your story about Ed Boon's favor surrounding Mortal Kombat was, I mean, again, I keep talking about things that are worth buying the book for. To me, that would have been worth buying the book for. And you have to read the book. It's a short story. It's like a paragraph. It's awesome. You did not disclose how much was in that envelope, and I don't know if you're legally allowed to say, but maybe off air you can tell me how much was in that envelope, because I know what Mortal Kombat was. I was alive and well and frantically playing, shoving money into that game every 2 seconds when I was at the arcade too at that time. Can you share with us?
I won't tell you the number, but I'll tell you a story that I don't think is in the book. I don't
all
think
right. I'm all ears.
At the time, I was getting into investing, okay?
Oh.
Because I hadn't really done much with investing, and not even in the stock market, but with futures trading. And right around this time, I was investing in futures, and I had made and I was taught as I was learning how to invest in futures, because they're very volatile and they're very dangerous, is that you always do like you do one trade, but then you do a trade in the other direction to sort of offset it. So so it will it'll limit your profits if you gain, but it'll also limit your losses if you lose. Where without the second trade, you literally can lose a lot of money. Anyway, I had been doing well, and I had been doing all these trades and safe trades and making little bits of money here and there. And then I decided, let me just do this one. I'm going to do this one, and I'm not going to do the safety trade, because I felt very confident and overly confident. Well, something happened with soybeans, and and you couldn't sell. They froze the market as they plummeted.
Oh no!
And I lost thousands and thousands of dollars. And the amount of money I lost was almost the exact same amount that I made from Mortal Kombat unexpectedly. That bonus from Mortal Kombat kind of evened out my losses from the soybean trade.
No.
I don't know. Let that be a lesson. It's kind of, you ever watch Seinfeld? You ever see that episode of Seinfeld where every time he loses something, he finds it, like he loses $20, but then he finds a $20 bill on the street? Did you not see that? That was kind of like, that's my life. That was kind of my life.
That's it. Yeah, maybe I should have opened my interviews with that. That would have been perfect. So the hits just keep on coming, and I'm trying to abbreviate this as much as I can because we're running out of time and it's going to make me crazy. You worked on a world building system for Revolution X, where music is the weapon, featuring Aerosmith. And again, the story is so good in the book. Don't want to give too much away, but you had some really neat technical moments in there. And I mean, read the damn book because these are so cool. I mean, not you read the book, you wrote the book, but I mean, there's so much great stuff about Aerosmith and Revolution X, and I was fascinated by your involvement with it. It didn't seem like, I mean, you were on set with them, and there were pictures in the book with you with them. It seems like it was incredibly satisfying, the work that you were doing. And is there anything like one of those great things you wanted to share, just to kind of, tickle them about your coverage of Revolution X in there? Because there was a lot there was a lot of good stuff.
I love to tell my celebrity urination story. That's my favorite thing.
Perfect. Let's do it.
It's just like you're in the bathroom, right, and you're just taking a little leak, and who comes in and goes to into the urinal right next to you? But it's Tom Hamilton, the bassist from Aerosmith. And then he just starts a conversation, and it's like, how do you have a conversation with a rock god,
Right?
While you're peeing, while the two of you
are
peeing.
My God.
Very strange shared moment, but it was my only celebrity urination story. So
Well, listen, not everybody even has a celebrity urination story, so
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Man, there's so much I'm going to have to skip. You had basically pitched House of the Dead before it was House of the Dead, and they passed on it. The Highlander video game story, damn, we could sit here for 20 minutes and talk about that. But we're going to skip that one, read the book, I guess. So, like, at the end of Revolution X, if your story in the book had ended right there, it would have been an amazing book. But we enter chapter 12 of your book, and it's titled Loose Ends, and your work continues. You were working on the WTARG stuff remotely, porting it to Windows, which that sounds like I would lose my head doing that. You worked with Disney Interactive, not the Imagineer job that you'd sort of, had on your list, your bucket list, but you did work on some tools for them. I was going to ask you more about the tools, but I'm afraid we're kind of running out of time. But is there anything you'd like to...
I eventually worked for Imagineering. I mean, towards the end of my Disney tenure, I spent 4 months as an Imagineer. So I did get to be
you said that's a whole other book, right? I mean,
yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know that there's enough to fill a book, but yeah,
a couple chapters maybe.
Yeah.
So just real quick, what sort of tools were you working with? Because it wasn't. Were you working on graphic tools like the WTARG stuff? Yeah, for them. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. The thing about Disney when I was hired there, they were farming out cells for their video games, farming out to another company, an approved Disney company, somebody who had to be approved to create cells of animation. And so for their video games, a company was drawing, full size animation cells to do the animations at something ridiculous like $220 a cell is what Disney was paying.
Oh my God!
And then these things would be scanned and reduced to 32 pixels by 32. It was insane. It was like, this is not a smart way or a cost-effective way to make images for a video game. So it took a lot, but at the beginning it was like, well, hey, we're Disney. We don't do things the way everybody else does. We do things the way Disney does things. So which I interpreted as me being, well, the dumb way and the expensive way. But so no, but eventually I think, they sort of came around and we would do things a little bit better, hopefully, with some off the shelf tools, because, I think, there were some off the shelf art tools in that era. But yeah. Anyway, but it was, I always enjoyed doing tools. It was just, to me, it was always very fun because it's challenging in a certain way. You're trying to make something that's usable, that helps people in their jobs, makes their lives easier. That's appealing to me.
It's so cool. You talk in the book, I know I'm watching the clock too. You talk in the book about getting faster, harder, more challenging Q Bert into MAME. And I don't know, it's sort of weird that we sort of crossed paths. I was providing some sound samples to like Mario Brothers. I was kind of involved in the early days of MAME too. They didn't like me because I asked a lot of questions and pointed out problems that the main developer of the application didn't like being questioned on. Was there some catharsis to having that labor of love finally in the hands of the player? I mean, it's your favorite version of Q Bert, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was. I mean, it was pretty exciting for me. I never thought, I thought it was just lost forever. And so again, it was like to have an opportunity to reach an audience that I never thought I would have. That was just hugely enticing to me. So, and it wasn't like I wanted to make any money off of it. I legally, I don't think I could have made any money off it. I didn't own it. So I think there was a risk there as well. I didn't know Sony was going to object, but it didn't seem like, Sony had didn't seem like Sony had a whole lot of knowledge that they owned Q Bert, which is another story in the book. But
that's a great story in the book, by the way. Yeah.
So, so no, I was just thrilled that it would get to reach an audience.
Did you know, you'd mentioned something in the book, like, I can't remember why I put this note in here, but did you know that it's actually playable in a browser from the Internet Archive site? Did you know that?
No, but it doesn't really surprise me nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought it was kind of interesting because it's like, I mean, I've got MAME builds all over the house, but to actually fire up a Pi and plug it into a TV and do all that's a lot of work. But I just looked around and was like, oh, look at this, I can actually play Faster, Harder, More Challenging Q Bert right here on the web. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, even just the existence of MAME in the 90s was just hugely exciting. It was because whoever thought you'd be able to play the actual ROMs? It's your actual ROM code that's driving these games that you're playing on your PC. It was that was pretty astonishing.
And to be completely fair, as a diehard retro gaming player, the simulations that were being written to capitalize on the IP of these games, they weren't very good. And so emulation, that's a whole nother show I could do. But I mean, emulation was a big deal. It was a big deal to play these accurately, where the patterns you used in the arcade still worked, all that good stuff. So it's a very exciting time.
Yep.
Well, listen, we're running out of time. I had like 5 or 6 more questions. They're gonna go in the bin.
Oh man.
We are here with Warren Davis, and again, another hour and a half has just gone like that. His book, Creating Q Bert and Other.
Save those questions. We'll do part 3 next year sometime.
we can go back to I'll sit like all day and talk to you. His book, Creating Q Bert and Other Classic Video Arcade Games, is available now at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere where books are sold. I'm waiting patiently for mine, and listeners of this show are going to hear about it, of course, when I get my copy, because I'll be talking about it. And then please, of course, reach out. Let me know when your signed copies are available, so I can let my audience know that they can get in on the line there and get that, because a lot of people want your signed copy of it. They don't want to get it from Amazon, so bless them.
Well, I'm hoping to have it available as soon as I figure out how I can order some, because my publisher has to tell me.
You're in the same boat as the rest of us.
Well, no, everybody else can order it from Amazon, but I have to get them through my publisher. So, so yes, as soon as I know how I can order some, I will get some. And as soon as they're in my hands, I will make them available. Probably be in January sometime. But then I will also be trying to do book signings. I would encourage your listeners, if they would like to have me come locally to where they are and do a book signing, please contact your local independent bookstore and ask them, how would I get there? How would you arrange for that? And I'll be happy to.
That's a great idea.
Pursue that. I'd love to do that. And of course, if there are any retro gaming shows in your local town, please have them reach out to me, and I would love to come and visit your town and bring my books and sign them. So,
be awesome. Well, sir, thank you again for yet another hour and a half of your time. It's an incredible book. I loved it. It blows my mind to think that by the time I got done with the book, it was sort of like only like 10 to 12 years. I felt like I was reading the entire life and times of Warren Davis, and then I started thinking that was like 12 years or something. Yeah. What a career! It's amazing. It's amazing.
Thanks. Thank you for being interested. That's, like I said, the only reason I wrote the book was it just seemed like people were interested, and it seemed like these were stories that people enjoyed hearing. So I hope it is entertaining and people enjoy it, and I'm always happy to tell the stories, but now they're in a book, so I don't have to.
You don't have to keep telling the stories. Buy the book. Here's the book. Well, thank you very much, sir.
I'll be looking for the stories that I've left out of the book. I'm sure there are some.
I'm sure there are many.
Like
Amazing guy, amazing career. So there's stuff in there we don't know.
You're an amazing guy too.
I appreciate that. I do not have Q Bert merch or Passenger Seat Radio merch out there. So I gotta tip my hat, sir.
I'm not a merch guy or a marketing guy, so
Yeah, not that you got to see any money from any of that anyway.
I used to go to retro gaming shows, and they'd give me a table, and it would just be a big empty table because I just it's not like I'm there to sell stuff. But
I think you got books now you can fill that with.
It's nice to have the books, yeah.
Well, sir, thank you again so much. Anytime you want to talk on the show, you got something to promote, you want to talk about anything, just let me know. I'd be happy to have you back. This is amazing, and maybe in the new year we can sit down and cover the other 20 questions I skipped for the purposes of time.
We'll find a time. I just need some recovery time. That's an hour and a half.
I'm draining you down, pulling you down.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Warren. Have a great rest of your day. Take care and have a good holiday season too.
Happy holidays to you too, sir.
All right, this is Shane R. Monroe. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget, part 1 is available on YouTube and on the Spreaker.com application on Passenger Seat Radio. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.